I have a message for those who insult Islam. Let's agree to disagree.
Freedom! Democracy! Freedom! Democracy!
Secularism means that the state doesn't interfere in people's rights to a faith or no faith, and no one religion dominates another.
Meet Tehmina Kazi, director of BMSD, British Muslims for Secular Democracy. They believe in the separation of church and state.
I'd say that the majority of British Muslims do support our work, or at least support our right to present this alternative voice, because for a long time the other sort of mainstream Muslim groups they had a very sort of conservative ideology, and ours is very unique in our approach, and we're the only British Muslim group with secular in the title. A lot of people, when you mention the word secular, tend to conflate it with atheism, but I'm trying to correct that misunderstanding and explain that it's more about the state's neutrality in relation to different religious groups. Well, I know that there's this strong perception of Islam being a misogynist religion. For example, there was a poll conducted last year where 69% of people questioned thought that Islam was anti-women. And I think the reason for this is culture, and the fact that cultural traditions often get mistaken for religion. A good example is forced marriages. There's absolutely nothing in Islam that says forced marriages are acceptable. Absolutely have to get the consent of the woman before she signs the nikah papers. And yet people think that just because a significant proportion of the forced marriage victims happen to be Muslim, they sort of mistakenly conflate that with the religion and attribute it to the religion, whereas they shouldn't. It is the culture of these people that they should be criticising.
Muslims are just over 4.5% of Great Britain's population. The majority come from southern Asia, 2/3 of them from Pakistan. In Oxford, we find one of British Muslims' most progressive organisations. MECO is the Muslim Education Centre of Oxford. Meet Taj Hargey, founder and director.
I don't have a problem with either reform or rejuvenation or revival. What is needed though is Islam has to talk to us in the 21st century. We cannot have Islam talking to us in 7th century language and of a 7th century mentality. That will not work, and that is not possible either.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wal asr.
Here, Taj is participating in Friday prayers. The woman who's leading Friday prayers is Amina Wadud, one of the West's most well-known Muslim feminist imams.
God does not burden any soul, any human being, with more than he or she is able to bear.
MECO campaigns for women's rights in Islam.
Or unwittingly go wrong.
MECO's credo is the home of erudite, egalitarian and enlightened Islam. And those 3 E's sums up our version of Islam. Islam must be erudite, in other words, it has to be rational. It must be enlightened, it must be forward-looking, open-minded, and it must be egalitarian, not only in terms of gender, but race, ethnicity, and all kinds of artificial constructs.
1 million Muslims live in London. This mosque in the East End was once a centre for radicalisation. But the majority of Muslims in London are not extremists and never have been. The majority who live and work here, in fact, feel very British.
I think of myself as a British Muslim, and that's because I see that both of those things are entirely compatible. To me, they're actually the same thing. So as a Muslim, the values that are important to me are things like freedom, the ability to change the society I live in, the idea that all people are equal, that we should be working to change things to make the world a better place. And for me, that's exactly what Britishness means as well. So I see them as actually the same thing. One is an expression of the faith and the religion that I practice. One is an expression of the geographic nationality that I hold.
Shelina rebelled against her culture when it was time for her to get married.
My parents had always really encouraged me to excel in my education, and when I left school I decided that I wanted to go to Oxford. But this was a real source of contention because I wanted to get the best education, but we didn't want to tell anybody that I was at Oxford because it would come across as me being too clever or too independent or too opinionated, which was definitely not any of the qualities that people were looking for their son. So we always kept that kind of hush-hush. And the more that I didn't talk about how clever I was or how intelligent I might be or what kind of job I had, the more that I felt I was suppressing part of me. I wasn't really being able to be true to myself. And this went on for a number of years. And then I finally thought, well, I'm not meeting anybody anyway, despite the fact that I'm hiding all these attributes that I have. So I may as well just go out and live my life. And I got an invitation to go and climb Mount Kilimanjaro, which is the tallest point in Africa. And I thought this would be a really exciting challenge, particularly as Kilimanjaro is actually located in the country where my parents grew up. And I thought that would be a nice full circle. And when I put this to people, they thought it was a shocking idea that a woman would want to climb a mountain. Why would a woman want to climb a mountain? And I said I didn't know. It just sounded quite an exciting thing to do. Girls didn't climb mountains, apparently, I was told. And again, I put forward stories from Islamic history. So talking about the wife of the Prophet, Lady Khadija, she would climb a mountain every day to go and visit him while he was meditating in this mount called the Cave of Hira, where he eventually received the revelation of the Quran. So I told them, reminded them of the story of Khadija, and they said, well, it's different now. You know, you can't go climbing mountains. And again, here was it right in my face that something that was so embedded and entrenched in Islamic history was something that I wasn't supposed to do because I was a girl.
She refused to get married to anyone who would not respect her opinions or her feminist ideas.
And then I decided that I'd finally had enough of all of this and I was going to go away and enjoy living my life and that life would be the journey itself. And I bought myself a sports car because I was working, I was earning my own money, and I thought it would be, really good fun to have this sports car, even if it was for a short while. And people would say, well, you can't have your headscarf flapping in the wind with the top down. And I'd say, what, would you prefer I didn't have my headscarf flapping in the wind as I drive my car? I have a Quran in the glove compartment if anyone wants to ask what kind of Muslim I am. And so I decided that I would actually go out and just embrace life and live it, because all of these things that I wanted to do were entirely permitted in my faith, in fact, encouraged in many ways. Climbing mountains is part of the exhortation in the Quran to go and see the world and travel it and understand what God has created. And at that moment I realised that I should be who I want to be, and if I was going to find a partner or a family, then they would have to accept me as I was.
Shelina waited 10 years before she found the man she wanted to marry. She wrote a book about her experiences, and it became a bestseller in India. Today she teaches workshops in the Middle East. She's become a role model and has her own blog.
I tend to talk to older teenage girls or those who've just got to university. And I think for them it's interesting to see the journey of a Muslim woman who in many ways is similar to them, who comes from an Islamic background, who has the cultural norms that come with that, but is trying to find her own way in the world and be independent and express their opinion. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about is how to understand who you are and how to express that, and then how to express your opinion to other people so that you start to build the kind of life that you want rather than just succumbing to what the cultural norms are.
We leave Great Britain now to travel to the USA. In San Francisco, Northern California's most beautiful city, we meet a Muslim philanthropist.
Completely motivated.
Meet Shahnaz taplin-chinoy. She wants to empower women in the third world and is one of the founders of an organisation that sponsors projects about women's issues in Muslim cultures.
I'm completely motivated by the idea of educating and empowering women, giving them the skill sets, enabling them to use technology to make their lives better, stronger, richer, have some more resources so that they can actually then contribute.
One project was a workshop for teachers from a girls' school in Pakistan, where they learned about gender politics and equality. The other was a microloan project in Senegal.
I definitely think I'm a feminist. And I think feminism is embedded in Islam. I mean, I see it from day one. If you think Aisha wasn't a feminist, you think, Khadija was not a feminist, who is? Prophet Muhammad was the first feminist because he eliminated female infanticide. He gave women the right to inherit property. He gave women the right to get a divorce. And he gave women the right to retain their dowry.
One of Shahnaz's favourites is the project in Egypt to eradicate FGM, female genital mutilation.
The strategy at our fund to combat FGM is to start by identifying a district, as we've done in Giza, where there were initially 16 practitioners of FGM. 4 practitioners have been pulled off of the work they were doing in performing procedures, female genital mutilation procedures, and have started new businesses. And we'd like to try and make this one district to start with FGM-free, which means we have 12 more practitioners that we need to rescue, so to speak, from the work they're doing and enable them to start new businesses.
In Southern California, there are other Muslims with progressive politics. Reinventing yourself is common in American society, and these young Muslims are no exception.
Allahu Akbar, Allah.
Meet Annie Zonneveld. She's co-founder of MPV, Muslims for Progressive Values, and co-editor of this book. She also marries interfaith couples and calls the faithful to prayer.
It's a thinking religion, and most people in our group, 99%, are thinkers. I think it would take someone to be thinking about their faith and to challenge about their faith to be progressive. You wouldn't be a sheep and be a progressive.
Annie is against exclusivity.
I think when you're raised with a filter of inclusivity, you read the Quran with that filter. If you are raised with a filter of hatred and exclusivity, like your club, your Islam club is the exclusive club, or your Christian club is the exclusive club, then you will read the Quran, the Bible, or whatever your faith tradition in that light.
Annie's an activist for LGBT rights, reaching out to the lesbian, gay, bisexual and transsexual community.
So we work legislatively with others, with progressive organizations, faith and non-faith-based, and we include gays and transgender in our community. We're very welcoming of them. So at the end of the day, it really is about how inclusive we are as a community, and that is the first step to working towards gay rights in Islam.
Annie's an activist for women's rights in the mosque.
As a Muslim, it is my responsibility to eradicate these practices and these beliefs, these gender biases from within my faith. I shouldn't be doing it from outside. There are a lot of others doing it. There should be Muslim women doing it from within the faith. And thankfully, there are many of us that are doing it.
In another neighborhood in Los Angeles lives one of America's Muslim media stars. Meet Reza Aslan, academic and author. He's written 3 books. This one was a bestseller. Reza describes religious reform as the transfer of authority from institutions to individuals.
When we look at the great thinkers, the great Islamic thinkers, both conservative and liberal, progressive and westernized, whatever, however you want to, and the entire gamut of Islamic thought over the last 100 years, you are hard-pressed to find a single cleric among them, a single member of the ulama, a single priestly figure. They're all engineers and professors and educators. Now, that may seem completely normal to us in the 21st century, but understand that the entirety of Islamic law is predicated on this one undeniable fact. The only people who have the right to interpret Islam, to say what Islam is and what Islam isn't, are the ulama. No one else is even allowed to say what Islam is or is not. And the people that you are speaking to today, whether they be progressive or not one of them, I would imagine, are clerics, are members of the ulama. Make no mistake, this wave of democracy activism that we are seeing across large parts of the Middle East is a direct result of this reformation process that I am talking about. There's a reason why the religious and political institutions, even those non-clerical institutions like the Muslim Brotherhood, have been left behind, because institutionalism by definition is becoming a dirty word in this region. It's about individuals. It's about deciding for yourself what it means to be Muslim in the 21st century. These kids are not willing to sit around and wait for the conclusion of the debates in Al-Azhar about whether Islam and democracy can be reconciled. They've already made that decision on their own. They don't care what the old men in turbans have to say.
There are many new interpretations of traditional Islamic scripture, and it's important to read these authors if you want to understand the reform movement. One of the interpreters is Tariq Ramadan. He's written 14 books on Islam and different reformers throughout the last 200 years. Another is Khaled Abu el-Fadel, who some call the Pope of Islamic tolerance. Another reformer is human rights philosopher and law professor Abdullahi Ahmad an-Naim, who teaches at Emory University. Meet Professor an-Naim. He calls himself a heretic and says heresy is necessary to change the status quo.
I subscribe and support an idea which I call celebration of heresy. By that I mean that heresy is a creative force, because it is about challenging dogma, it's about challenging ways of thinking.
Inside the reform movement, the most important questions concern human rights. Everything else is subordinate to this.
And the way I argue for it all my life is an Islamic commitment. And because I believe in human dignity, and because I believe in that fear is the cause of all evil, and because I believe in that if the rights are not shared by others, they have no meaning for me. Now these values are my African Islamic values. They are not Western values. To say human rights is Western is to deny the universality of human rights.
Professor an-Naim is at the university's Center for Law and Religion.
Ijtihad is a term that is used to describe the creative juridical thinking and theological thinking. Now this obligation is of every single Muslim, and it is not limited to scholars. Because every single Muslim has to identify at any given point what is required of her or him as a Muslim in the given situations. So originally every Muslim had to read the Quran and try to understand and act accordingly and be responsible. Then you get a time when you have a class of so-called ulama, scholars, who want to mystify and to want to exclude. Ijtihad is very technical. You can't do this. Only we can do it.
He says that the ulama purposely mystified the Quran, Hadith and Sunnah in order to maintain their position of power and privilege.
And you have to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Who says so? So this notion that we have to have highly qualified people certified from certain institutions is a class sort of invention that tries to exclude people so that it can become the high priests of free thinking. And of course, once they have the control of it, they are not going to allow it, because free thinking undermines their own power and their own privilege.
North of Atlanta is Georgetown University in America's capital, Washington, D.C. Meet Asra Nomani at the Daniel Pearl Center for Investigative Journalism. She says American mosques have become men's clubs.
I became a feminist in the balcony of my mosque in Morgantown, West Virginia. I became a feminist when I realized that if I didn't stand up for women's rights, I would constantly be put in the shadows of my community.
Asra forced gender integration of her mosque in West Virginia.
My decision to go into the front door of my mosque in Morgantown, West Virginia, and into the main hall was a result really of a lifetime of meditation and reflection on the status of women inside of our Muslim community. So frustrated from my earliest days as a little girl because we were always given second-class status inside of our community because of this interpretation of Islam that the Saudis had exported into the world. Just decided I wasn't going to do anything about it. You know, I felt the frustration, and I took the path that I think many Muslims have taken in the face of these interpretations that are so suffocating. And I just lived my life as I chased my dreams out in the world. But I realized after September 11th and after the kidnapping and murder of a dear friend of mine, Danny Pearl, in the name of Islam, that I couldn't claim to be a Muslim and allow these kind of interpretations to go unchecked and unchallenged. So it was really scary. I couldn't get the courage to go into the main hall for days because there's such a crush of pressure inside of any community when you want to challenge the status quo. You know, I had gone, interviewed the Taliban, gone into Afghanistan, you know, broken every rule as a journalist to get information and to assert myself. But in my community, all I kept hearing were the same voices of honor, you know, that I believe stifle us as a larger community. A good girl wouldn't act out. A good girl isn't going to challenge the men, you know. A good girl isn't going to say, you're wrong and I'm right. When I went into the main hall, the men did surround me, and my family was there, and they tried to scare us out of that space. But the only reason why I felt clear and certain about what we needed to do was because I knew that the consequence was 9/11, Danny Pearl's kidnapping and murder. Because incrementally, we had to challenge the ideology in every way that expressed itself when it comes to intolerance.
In New York City, we find another Muslim reformist, Mona Eltahawy. Mona is a journalist and a vocal defender of women's rights around the world. She's famous for her cover story, Why Do They Hate Us in Foreign Policy, and for spray painting over a racist poster in New York City.
Non-violent protest. You see this, America? This is non-violent protest.
You spray painted me.
This is what happens.
So what I try to do, I can't speak for other Muslim women who are feminists, what I try to do is bring that spirit back, because I do believe Muhammad was a feminist. I do believe Muhammad was a revolutionary. I do believe Muhammad came and turned his community and society upside down.
Mona is single and refuses to get married. She wants to separate sex from matrimony.
My position on sex and sex-positive feminism and sex-positive Islam is it should apply to everybody. I believe we are in a stage, we've reached a stage where we need honest and frank reinterpretations of the religion that do not bind or hold that sex-positive attitude to just the married couple. I believe anyone who wants to have sex should have sex, as long as it's consensual and violence is not involved, and it's between two people who are able to consent to that sex, where a yes is clearly given. It's nobody else's business. But we need to make it our business so that we can protect our young women especially, and we need to make it our business so that we can protect both women and men from those who abuse the power of religion when it comes to sexual relationships. Everybody deserves to have sex. Sex is a human right.